Hello there and welcome to Business Unusual, the weekly webinar series where business leaders tune in to what other business leaders are doing during this most unusual season that's been set upon us. My name is Karen Lam. Thank you for tuning in, and more importantly, for those of you who included your questions in the registration form, thank you for giving it some thought. If, however, you haven't done that yet, well, you still get a chance to chip in during this webinar, but be forewarned, because of the constraints of time, I may not be able to cover all of it, but I'll see what I can do. Today, we are going to be hearing from a well-known Indonesian business leader whose products span the major islands of the world's largest archipelago, Indonesia. My mind is boggled every time I think about that country. We're talking about 6,000 inhabited islands, 5 major ones, 30 smaller ones, a landmass of 1.7 million square kilometers. 1.7 million square kilometers. I could not wrap my head around that size, so I did a little bit of research and I discovered that if you put the 9 other ASEAN states together, you will have a landmass that's just slightly bigger than Indonesia. So huge width, huge length, but also huge depth because they're 270 million in population. We're talking about a median age of 30 years old, a growing middle class, and what all that means is that it is a hotbed of business opportunities. But like most of the world, things have grounded to a halt in Indonesia with the lockdown. So the question that we have today, really, how are businesses operating? What opportunities are there? And what puts some businesses in better stead than others to deal with this most unusual business environment? Well, my guest today runs the company that makes Sari Roti. That's Indonesia's best-selling mass market bread. The company, Nippon Indosari Corpindo, has 13 factories spread across Indonesia, widely spread across because you have to realize bread is an item with a very short shelf life, so it has to reach its points of sale very quickly. Well, my guest is the founder and president of Indosari. She and her company are regulars on Forbes Asia's many lists. We're talking about the best of the best under $1 billion, 50 power business women, and the list goes on. And it's a little wonder why, because she has grown the company over the last 25 years from nothing to where it is today, through the highs and lows of the economic, social, political cycles of Indonesia. Well, today we have come to yet another critical juncture of the world's history, really. And as with all testings, will this be her worst or her finest hour? Wendy Yap, thank you very much for joining me on Business Unusual. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing fine. Thank you.
Well,
Good
just
morning, everyone.
Yeah, yes, it is the morning. We do lose track of time in this lockdown sometimes, Wendy. So I want to start off, Wendy, very quickly by giving a very quick tribute to your father, first of all, who passed on last year. This is a meeting, I'm going to show this picture of the both of you that I met for the first time in Jakarta. This was 5 years ago in 2015. And for the uninitiated, Piet Yap is one of Indonesia's finest business leaders and indeed a very fine human being, in my opinion. He was a gifted commodities trader who founded the world's largest flour mill in Indonesia, Bogasari. But for me, when I encountered him, he was not so much that giant of a business leader, but he was really a proud father who couldn't stop boasting about the achievements of his daughter. So Wendy, you are very, very blessed to have a father such as him.
Thank you. I am indeed.
So you are working out of Singapore right now. So tell us, what's it like to run your business in Indonesia out of Singapore?
Well, for me, it has never, it's always been the same. Since I founded Sari Roti 25 years ago, I've always spent Tuesdays to Fridays in Indonesia, in Jakarta, growing the company and my other family businesses as well. And Fridays to Mondays, usually in my family office or in Singapore, for the weekend. And over the years, I've built up very, very good infrastructure, very, very good group of people who help me to implement and execute. So my role actually as the founder has always been on strategic management and on planning, not day-to-day operations. So they execute and they implement. So currently, working out of Singapore on Zoom calls is sufficient to do that because I'm not needed day-to-day because I have such good people on the ground.
And really, that's a testimony of the systems and that you've set in place over the years that has worked very well for you. So well done for that. I want to give our audience a very quick understanding of your company. Sari Roti, as I said, 25 years, 90% of the market segment of the mass market bread segment belongs to you. Last year, you netted sales of 225 million US dollars. And also, interestingly, the reason why you have the name Nippon Indosari Corpindo, the reason why you have the name Nippon in your company name is the fact that you are part owned by Shikishima bread company in Japan. So tell us how the Japanese came into the picture.
In the beginning, well, I was doing Wendy's hamburgers before. In the early 90s.
Was that by accident or was that purposeful?
Well, my father actually, he wanted me to come back from the States. So he said, why don't you come back and help me in the business? So I said, what would I do? And he said, well, you could help me do investments and, just help him, plan his investments and do it. But then that was too passive for me. So running his real estate business in the States, and I was so hands-on there. So I said, no, I think I would do something else. So he said, okay, do fast food. So, and we came across Wendy's hamburgers in Columbus, Ohio. I remember he and I went to see Dave Thomas, the founder. And Dave asked him, why does he want Wendy's hamburgers? So he said, because my daughter's name is Wendy. and Dave Thomas immediately he said, okay, well, my daughter's named Wendy too. My daughter is named Wendy too. So, okay, you can have it. And he said, where do you want the franchise? And my father said, the whole of Asia. I want China, Hong Kong, and Indonesia. So that's how we started in Indonesia. And Wendy's hamburgers taught me a lot about systems, manuals, SOPs, So doing that, after we sold it, my father said, what would you do now? So I said, okay. I said, I don't know. And he said, oh, how about bread? Because, we did bogasari. We're already in noodles. So how about you do bread? So I said, okay, I will do bread, but I want to do it my way. And he said, that. I said, it's got to be mass market. I'm not interested in a boutique bakery. I said, that is that because I want a mass market, like something like fast food where I can put in systems and the people. So he said, okay, he said, let's do that. And he said, well, so how would you start? I said, I don't know. I only like to eat bread. I love Japanese bread. So immediately he got the idea. He said, let's go to Japan. And he had his wheat, he was his wheat trading partners there. Nisho Iwai, and they introduced us to Pasco Shikishima, and Shikishima is our partner today. And yes, and they've been our partner. They're the Morita family, very established from Nagoya. They've been doing the business for 100 years, and the old man got along really well with the late Morita and my late father got along so well together. So that's how the two families got together and established Sari Roti. And when they first came in, the Japanese partners depended a lot on us for the taste of the people, because the taste is very different than the taste of the people in Japan, and the consumer behavior and all that. And they brought in the Japanese technology. So we've had them as partners for the longest time, and they're very good partners, very stable, very solid, and very, very knowledgeable. So we're very pleased with that.
Wonderful. And I mean, it is a big move, because having the Japanese involved, well, definitely in terms of technology, you've benefited for it, but there's also cost, and that's a cost which I'm sure you're also happy to pay.
Cost in terms of?
Cost in terms of being able, including them into including Japanese technology, for instance? You could have done it locally, but you chose to go the Japanese way.
There was no local technology. Local technology was not mass market. Local technology was boutique.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I liked the Japanese style bread because the quality of the Japanese style bread is very soft, and most Asians love it. However, at that time in Indonesia, Japanese bread was not available, and it was only available in Singapore. And even the boutique bakeries, they were only available to those people who could afford it. It was quite expensive, to buy a piece of.
Sorry. Okay.
Everybody in Indonesia, and today we cover the A, B, and the C categories for this bread, and we are able to bring the Japanese quality in using mass market technology, and yet be able to keep the price down to sell to all the people in Indonesia. And what I wanted to do, I did not want to go into the niche segment.
Right. So there is an interesting story behind that, and the way you would and the way you distribute your bread to the masses, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on. But I just want to come up to talk about the operation. So now that the lockdown in Indonesia has started, it started late April, which is relatively late. Tell us a little bit about how your operations are going through this lockdown.
Well, it's I think a blessing that I come to Singapore every weekend, because Singapore started some already measures in February, as early as February. And although Indonesia did not announce the lockdown until March the 17th, I was able to put a lot of the measures, the quarantine measures, the hygiene measures that Singapore had implemented as early as February into our factories and into our offices. So we had the temperature checks, we had the mask. I stopped all our employees going to conferences. They were not allowed to travel. And I think there was only one conference they had to travel, and we had to screen them medically that they were all fit to travel. If they were not well, they were not allowed to go to the conference, to attend the conference. But there, other than that, so we started all this already. So when the lockdown happened, my employees were already very used to this. They were used to disinfecting, using sanitizers, masks and everything. So I think that was a blessing in disguise, and in the sense that in disguise meaning that I go to Singapore every weekend, so I sense the pulse of the urgency of taking these measures for hygiene, for quarantine. So in that sense, I believe that we started early, and even today, some of our factories, we have high security because people are just not allowed to go in and out as freely without all these checks in place.
And I would imagine, are you running at regularly? Are there any restrictions to operations?
No, there aren't restrictions to operations. In fact, it's easier for us today to recruit more people because there were so many people out of jobs in other factories during this virus, and it's easier for us to recruit people like we needed for packaging for some of the lines, and truck drivers, and so we were able to give also employment to them. The reason is we needed to recruit more people is because we ramped up capacity, because the demand for our bread was increased, and we had to increase the number of shifts at some of the factories from 2 shifts to 3 shifts, and some from 1.5 to even 2.5. So that was good actually that we were able to do this. But it's a good problem to have that the demand is increased.
Yes, indeed. And this is not the first time, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But for now, so the partial lockdown was announced in March, but the total lockdown, at least for transport links and all, was announced in late April. Are there any differences in your operations from the partial to the total lockdown?
No, actually, food is considered essential, so it wasn't affected at all. So we still were able to get raw materials. The transport was good. Our raw materials, by the way, are all local, so it was not a problem for us to get it. Plus, we are big enough that we were able, during the when Indonesia announced the lockdown, we secured a lot of raw materials and just stored it at our factory, so that in case should there be a problem with transportation, we already have the raw materials available to keep producing the bread. So we were actually very ready that all that we were able to prepare in case should there be a total lockdown. We're still able to produce bread.
Right. So that's in Indonesia, and you're doing very well. Demand is there, capacity is up. You also have one factory in the Philippines, which you started quite recently. I think it was in 2018. That, on the other hand, hasn't been doing very well. In the first quarter, there's been losses of 1.2 million, I understand, from that production line. I know it's a very small proportion of your contributions, but my question is, what's been the difference in the lockdown in Indonesia as opposed to the Philippines?
Okay, so, sorry, you got cut off, Karen, and the Wi-Fi kind of like went off.
Okay,
sorry.
yes. So did you get my question? You didn't?
No.
Okay.
No, not at all.
All right. So I was talking about your operations in the Philippines, and this was and Philippines started their lockdown much earlier in March, and you saw in your first quarter some losses there amounting to 1.2 million US dollars there. But of course, that is a very small proportion of your entire contribution. Nevertheless, I'm interested to know what's been the difference between the lockdowns in Indonesia as opposed to the Philippines. Why is it that you were able to ramp up capacity, meet demand, increase demand in Indonesia, but not in the Philippines?
They are increased demand in Philippines, but the problem is Philippines, the lockdown was because of it affected also the transportation. So we were not able to even produce the bread, even though the demand was high. So we could only do 1.5 shifts. We could not do the full 2.5 shifts that we wanted, because there were a lot of because we have to get accommodation for the people that work in the factory around that area, because a lot of them live outside that area. And when Philippines had the lockdown, they had checkpoints that people were not allowed to transfer from region to region, whereas they didn't have that in Indonesia. So and also, even if they had to be transported to the factory from another region, we did not have enough accommodation for them around the factory area for them to stay in. So we had to reduce to 1.5 shifts, and in fact, not even 1.5. It's almost between 1 to 1.5 shifts. We could not produce enough, so that's why the sales went down. It's not because we could not. There was no demand. There is a lot of demand in the Philippines.
Right. So they're essentially not getting the supplies then.
Not only supplies, we cannot deliver because a lot of the transport companies were cut off from us. So we could only use certain transportation companies. We could only have 1 to 1.5 shifts operating. And we had to supply to only those people that had the highest demand. So a lot of our customers could not get the bread.
So what is the situation? Is it a wait and see right now? Because I mean, essentially your hands are tied. Are you just waiting for the transportation links, for instance, to be lifted before you move around?
Yes, we are for the transportation link, but we're waiting more for the lockdown to finish so that we can get those extra workers into the factory, because we should be operating at 2 full shifts. But we can't do that. Whereas in Indonesia, it's easy. You have 13 plants. If this plant is has a problem, you just get it from another plant.
That's right. So this pandemic, interestingly, it isn't your first rodeo in terms of crises in your company's history. When you first started Sari Roti back in '97, you were very rudely greeted at that time by the Asian financial crisis. And of course, Jakarta or Indonesia was one of the countries that was most impacted by that crisis. There were protests, there were riots, and voila, you had Sari Roti being introduced to the market. What was it like?
In fact, we grew the best during the Asian financial crisis. We started production in 1997. And then in 1998, the crisis came, and we sold so much. All our bread was oversold all the way until 2000, and that was when our brand was built up. Actually, everybody knew Sari Roti because it was the only bread that had 5-day shelf life and pre-packaged, so they could buy it and then keep it at the houses because they didn't know when the next time they could go to the supermarket. There were a lot of demonstrations then and a lot of problems in the economy. So our bread became very famous because of that. So after 2000, we never looked back. We just grew and grew, and then in 2004, our second factory was up.
So, I mean, you seem to thrive in the worst of times.
Crisis brings opportunities, I suppose, as all the Wall Street people say.
It does, indeed. So since you started and introduced bread as a mass market product, bread has become very much a lifestyle product with the growing middle class. Do you think that this is a question that I have from one of our audience members? Do you think that the consumer behavior will change post-COVID?
Yes. First thing is, okay, during this lockdown, most people in Indonesia are staying home. The majority are staying home. So they're buying things online. So it will change the consumer buying habits, which means they're buying online, they want home delivery service. So our general trade, in terms of the hawkers and the tricycles, the agents are thriving because they are able to give the door-to-door service that Indonesia had long time ago when I was growing up. I mean, it was so nice. You knew your local noodle seller, and you know what time they will come, and that's what's happening right now with our hawkers when they sell the bread, door to door. So in terms of consumer buying, yes, it has it's changed a little. That there's less coming in from the coming in from the city, but outside the city in the suburban area, there's a lot of it in the mini marts, and consumers are still buying bread. And bread, somebody asked me, bread, they say it's not a staple. Rice is still a staple of Indonesia. And I say, yes, I know. I eat rice. I have to have my rice every day. But bread has become more of a breakfast item today, even more important. And they buy our sliced bread, which is very good value for them because their sliced bread can go even into lunch, into snacks, if they want something to eat. So that's done very well. The consumer habit, though, has changed in the sense that they go more for sliced bread and more family packs. So because of the lockdown, but post-COVID, I would see that these would start to come back up again, as people start going to the offices and all that. But the trend is, I think, more back to basics. People are not going to get creative anymore. Like they want a cheesecake bread, for example, which has been requested of us from so many consumers, but today no one's even thinking about cheesecake bread. They're just thinking of chocolate bread and the basics, kaya bread, the cheese bread. Who cares about cheesecake bread? So I think it's going to go back to basics on that front.
So you have currently, I think, about 20 in your stable of products. You have about 20 varieties of breads and cakes. So you're saying that post-COVID, you're going to be streamlining that, reducing the varieties a little bit more?
We have 13 plants across Indonesia. So depending on the areas that we streamline.
And how do you get information on the areas and what sort of breads are preferred in those areas?
From our sales team. When they sell, you can tell that from the numbers that come in, and from our sales team and our marketing team. We have a very strong sales and marketing team.
And that information is also very uniquely gathered. Now, I just want to give our audience a very quick understanding. So Wendy mentioned earlier on this thing called the general trade, where she uses the tricycles to get into the homes of Indonesians, especially in the remoter parts. So Sari Roti has about 80,000 points of sale. Again, can't seem to wrap my mind around that, but enough to say that there are two types of trades, Wendy, that you deal with. The first one is the modern trade, which is where your bread goes into the hypermarkets, the supermarkets, and the mini markets. But what's very unique about Sari Roti is the fact that you have what's known as the general trade, and this is the tricycles, your signature Sari Roti cart that goes right into the neighborhoods of Indonesians. You've got the motorcycles, and you've got the bread that distributed right into the mom and pop stores, the warongs. So, and that's something that your competitors have found it challenging to penetrate into. How in the first place did you manage to even start this whole process for you to get there? And by the way, according to your latest figures, 56% of your sales is generated through general trade and 43% in the modern trade. So how did the general trade channel start in the first place?
I think the numbers are not 56%. Currently, we are 75% from the modern trade, and 25%, 25% from the general trade.
Perhaps that's general, because I think this is, if I'm not wrong, this was from your first quarter results. So maybe it was just in that particular quarter with the lockdown, and from January to March.
The general trade
increase in general trade.
Yeah, general trade went up by 26% in the first quarter, but our sales contribution from the two sectors are still 75% modern trade and 25% general trade. Yes, our general trade last year went up by 40%, and this year just the first quarter alone is already 26%, which is pretty good. General trade has done extremely well. Modern trade is a very straightforward thing: mini mart, supermarkets, the boring stuff. Okay, so you have it everywhere. And modern trade, in the suburbs have done extremely well, because people are locked down. They don't go to work that frequently. But general trade has really gone up, because we are not only able to hire the more hawkers, and we recruit more hawkers now, because there's so many of these. I tell you, there's so many of these warung, the noodle sellers and the hawkers that have no job because of the lockdown. They actually just say, either we die of the virus or we die of starvation. So they look for jobs. So we give them. And so we've been able to recruit a lot of hawkers, actually, that go from door to door. And they are so grateful for us to be able to give them, work. And they sell our bread, and they make good money. So we've done that. And that's, so we've recruited a lot of people. And our general trade has really taken off. We also do online right now, online, and online was started actually as early as last year, and 2 years ago when we did e-commerce. We went, and now we are even more sought after online, because people, but the hawkers now that we recruit now, they now can also do the delivery part of the online, so which is really good. So I think in times like this, the general trade will take off very well. And it's something that I've been hoping for many years. None of our mass market competitor bread producers have general trade. We are the only ones. So we started this actually right from the beginning, when we started the business in the early 2000s, the general trade, and it was growing very slowly, because as Indonesia was growing and becoming more modern, and everybody wanted to go to the mini marts more, and people just went out. Nobody wanted the old-fashioned style hawkers to come to their house, and now they are actually going back that way. And our general trade also covers a lot of distributors who have the independent mini marts, so they also are doing very well. So they're not as restricted as the big mini marts, to carry our bread.
And it's. Well, I can imagine that your competitors would probably not want to go near general trade with a 10-foot pole, largely because it's such in my imagination, is such that it's such an unwieldy web, a complex web of distributors and agents that you'll have to go through. Are the costs necessarily higher in the general trade?
It's the same. It's the same. Give the same discount. Yeah. We say give the same discount. Probably, in Ramadan, because the 2 weeks everybody's going back and nobody really wants to work. It'll cost us a little bit more only because we have to give them incentive, so that they don't go back and they'll continue to sell our bread. But it's about the same.
So you mentioned earlier that because of the lockdown, the general trade has been doing very well. Does that therefore presuppose that after the lockdown, the proportion will sort of even out and modern trade will take over again?
I think general trade will continue, I believe, to increase more than the modern trade. The reason is people will understand what it's like to work from home more, and I think the demand for the general trade will remain. The hawkers also know that Sari Roti takes care of their employees well. So I believe that we will get more hawkers, or the existing hawkers will just remain to work with us. They will feel that this is good in case there's another second wave or pandemic or whatever. They don't have to keep looking for new jobs.
And have you been able to what have been some of the changes that have been put in place in the HR? When I talk about HR, I don't just mean within the Sari Roti, as in the company Indosari, but in dealing with people. Surely with the increase in demand, I assume that there has been no retrenchments. If anything, you are employing more people. But the way have there been changes in the way you reach out to the hawkers, to people in general?
So your question is whether we've been employing more people during this crisis?
Yeah, more people, or whether just you mentioned that people are very important in this whole process, and how have you and a big part of this pandemic has been focused on not so much businesses, but the fact that businesses support people and families, and we have this aspect of the people aspect of this pandemic. And I'm just wondering how Indosari has stepped up its efforts to help people along the way.
We do. We recruit, especially the hawkers. We've recruited a lot of hawkers. Those that have no jobs, we've recruited a lot of them to do the home delivery, and we're also recruiting some salespeople as well to help move to help further to sell more bread, because there's so much demand. We don't have enough, so it's probably on the sales side more so. And the hawkers, the basic the senior management remains the same. They're still they're all very capable to handle all this. We have very good production. We have very good HR. Even HR is able to step up and hire very quickly if we wanted to. The logistics, supply chain management is he's excellent. There was one time when I said I needed extra trucks, and he's able to give me an answer like within a day. Wow. Which is really great. Yeah, we have very, very good, strong systems in place. Our sales and marketing are amazing. They are on the ground. They know exactly what's going on with the hawkers. They know exactly what's going on with consumer behavior. So the feedback comes very, very quickly. We talk about almost every day, because in this kind of situation, we cannot wait for our weekly meetings or even twice weekly meetings. It's almost like a daily thing, because you have to react very fast. And there are a lot of white spaces that out there that are not being able to get bread, and now we can actually serve those white spaces as well.
So you're really working overtime.
Yeah, actually I'm busier now than before. At least I was telling a friend the other day, how come I'm so busy now, and I get super tired at night because I don't get to nap on the planes anymore on Tuesdays and Fridays. And I don't get to nap in the traffic jams in Indonesia when I go to the airport. So I guess I'm super tired.
Well, always a silver lining somewhere. Are there areas with this pandemic and with so many changes that's happening super fast all around you, and your reaction, as well as not just reaction, what I'm seeing as well in the way you operate is not just reacting to situations as they arise, but you're actually also doing a lot more to prepare for what is ahead. So are there any areas in your operations which you may perhaps want to accelerate post-COVID?
I think we have a lot on our plate already. So, I would like to perhaps we are not going to expand more factories because we have already enough capacity. And it was very timely. It was very timely that we did the rights issue 3 years ago to get the funding to build the factories. And people were wondering, how come you need so much money, and why are you building 5 factories when you're only at 65-70% capacity?
That's right.
About 70% capacity. And I said, because it takes, first thing is it takes 18 months to build a factory. And you just can't wake up one morning and say, look, I need the capacity. It's not going to happen. So you've got to plan this ahead. So when we did the rights issue 3 years ago, our factories were up the following year and last year as well. So this year, another 2. So by the end of this year, we will have 5.5 factories. Over a period of 3 years. That's pretty good, because now I have to ramp up capacity. I have the capacity. And that's the problem with Philippines. It wants to ramp up capacity, but it can't.
Yeah. So that's a very interesting story, the rights issue. So, you issued the rights issue at a time when people were wondering why would you even want to do that? You were running at 50-60% capacity. In fact, if anything, during that quarter, I understand sales were down, and the market reacted very negatively to the rights issue. And I'm just thinking, were there any doubts in your mind at that time with the kind of backlash that you received? Surely you must have been thinking, am I doing the right thing when everyone else thinks I'm not?
Well, one thing, when the rights issue was done, our sales were not down. It just was not increasing at the rates that it should have been increasing before. But then a lot of people just don't understand that even that you are operating at 70% capacity, they think you have 30% more. So why are you starting to build factories? Because we know that we knew at that time that sales would increase. And even if they didn't, it just increased at a faster rate. It would still go up to 80-90%. You do not want to run at factories at 100% capacity, because if one breaks down, you're in trouble. So
what gives the confidence sales would increase, though, Wendy?
Sales would increase with a population of 280 million people, and with our new products that are being launched, and with 280 million people, with majority of the population below the age of 35, it was a natural for sales to increase, because there were so many white spaces we had identified that were not covered. They didn't even know what about our bread. So and the rising middle income, they all want to get better bread. The ones that the other what you call home industries, they weren't giving them that bread. The home industry would be really low priced and very low quality bread. Then you have your competitors, the other mass market competitors. They were only sold in the MT. So if you are going to expand your GT, don't you think you need to have something to sell? So you have to increase your sales. So the planning starts early. Like in every organization, if you don't start thinking ahead and you don't start planning early, you're gonna miss the boat when the time comes.
And you also acted early when it came to the recent government share buyback that was announced by the Indonesian government. I think it was sometime in March, wasn't it? So there's a story behind that too.
Yes. March 12th, they announced the share that the OJK announced that they would allow companies to to buy back their shares. After the lockdown was announced in March, after the lockdown, they sensed that the lockdown was going to happen the following week. So March 12th, when OJK announced that, and the stock market started dropping, we applied for the share buyback, because we believe in the fundamentals of our company. We believe that if investors want to sell the shares, we will support our share price, because the fundamentals are good. And true enough, in April, our first quarter results came out very good. So I'm very happy to support our company shares.
And it's interesting, because you had mentioned earlier to me privately that with some of the other companies, because you came in early, and banks had the liquidity to loan out money to you, and that you managed to do that. But the other players who came in later and started to approach the bank then said, that's it, that we've run out.
Yes, the liquidity ran out. So we were anticipating why they would put the share buyback, anticipating that the lockdown would happen, the first virus being announced in early March. I sense that if there was a liquidity problem, it was just a natural to follow. So we applied for credit lines, and we were able to get it very easily.
What did you see that other people didn't see? I mean, liquidity is always the issue, and of course, to someone from the outside, as I'm watching, I'm thinking, oh yeah, it's a no-brainer, right? The liquidity, that there is always a limit to it. But why would some players be slow on the uptake in this area?
I think you have to know your business really well, Karen. I know that in times like this, we may have to stock a lot of raw materials. Okay, from what happened in the Philippines, they had the lockdown. We were short of some raw materials. They were delayed, but not too bad. It wasn't too bad. But when all this lockdown happens, and you see, you may not be able to get raw materials. The trucks may be stopped, and it's important to stock up enough inventory. So I needed the liquidity. So I bought a lot of raw materials to stock in our factories. And I know that we would have to do more shifts, because during the first part of March, even before this share buyback or lockdown was announced, you can see already the people already hoarding food. It happened in Singapore. It happened in Indonesia in the first week of March. Happened in Philippines. What do they hoard? They hoard the staples: noodles, rice, pasta, bread. So we know that already. So we cannot afford to let production, to stop production due to a virus. Where they have to disinfect for 5 days or 6 days. You lose 6 days production. So the only way, to do it was to be able to recruit people, get the shifts, and and just in case you need more credit line that was always there. Just in case you need to buy back your shares to support your company, because your company is doing so well during this time. But investors don't understand. When there's panic around the world, it was irrational selling, really. In early March, it was really irrational selling across the global stock markets. It wasn't just Indonesia. No, it was you have to be prepared. When this happens, what happens? You have bank runs, you have people hoarding food, and it's human nature. So if you don't anticipate this, how are you going to prepare for it?
What keeps you on your toes, Wendy?
Oh, it does. It does.
Well, what is it? What is it that I mean, I would imagine that. How do you even sleep at night? Because at every juncture, you're just gonna have to make sure that you're ahead of the curve.
I sleep very well at night. I sleep 8 to 9 hours every night.
And that's a blessing.
It's a real blessing.
I've got a question that's come in online, which is what I would call a gift question to you, which is looking at Sari Roti's stock price right now. Is it a great opportunity for investors to get in on it? So you'll say here.
Well, I don't know. Depends. Depends. What you want to do with the stock. But if you're, for me, Sari Roti at any price is a good entry point, because we're growing so much. So I don't know whether that answers your question. It's very hard. I am supporting my share price. Let's put it this way.
Okay, well said indeed. All right, now I just want to look at what take the discussion right now to a little bit past COVID, into what will happen after the lockdown. So there's talk in Indonesia right now, with the rising unemployment, that there could possibly be another round of protests and riots. How prepared are you for that?
I think post-COVID, that's why the government of Indonesia, I think, has been very, very good in doing not a total lockdown. They've been doing more of a partial lockdown, trying to get not to shut down all the businesses so that there would be, that the economy would fall and there would be rioting. So from that aspect, from that aspect, I think they've done very well. Post-COVID, you have to always got to be careful of these riots because Indonesia, there's such a lot of unemployment right now, and a lot of businesses cannot employ. They have had to actually retrench a lot of the employees. We're one of the few that actually employ more and recruit more people. But in terms of rioting, I think we have to be very careful. I think the Indonesian government is already, they're prepared for that. Should that happen, it's a matter of how they manage the economy, how they manage, the lockdown. The easing of the lockdown.
So what are you as a business person doing to prepare for that? If it happens?
Well, we are prepared in terms of, we have already the security measures and everything in place for all our plants. So we're prepared that should that happen, we'll probably sell more bread.
Once again, you always thrive in bad times.
Like in 1998, but we try as much. We've done so much of donating bread to a lot of poor people. It's I mean, this is public knowledge. We're donating so much to the frontline workers, in the hospitals, in the medical clinics. We're donating even to the poor families at this time. So we've done a lot for that, and we will probably continue to do that post COVID because there will be a lot of workers and families that are not, they're not able to get food.
Mm-hmm. Wendy, every time I think about Indonesia and, there's this people talking about riots and protests, and I'm wondering, what quality must a business person have to survive these lows of the economic impact, especially a business person of a minority race?
Well, I never look at it that way because I don't look at myself as a minority race. I look at Indonesia as one whole country, and with a lot of opportunities. That's why our motto is. Our motto of Sari Roti this year is Cinta Indonesia, Love Indonesia, Satu Indonesia, One Indonesia, and Rotinya Indonesia, the bread of Indonesia. So, I've always looked at Indonesia as a whole country, and it should have, like what my father started in the flour mill long time ago, when Suharto asked for the first flour mill to be set up in Indonesia. Why do we have to import? Why does all the good things happen overseas? Why not in Indonesia? The Indonesian people have also a right to have good bread, good flour, good things in life. And that is something that he said. And I think I sensed that when I started this mass market bread. I wanted that for the whole of Indonesia.
Mm-hmm. It's good to be colorblind, isn't it? In many ways. So, well said, Wendy. I think that's really something that we all need to, we all desperately need to hear in a time like that. It is about unity. It is about coming together, and it's wonderful to hear that this is not even a thought that has crossed your mind. So my final question to you, Wendy, is on behalf of our audience. Two parts to this question. If you were to mentor a business owner of an SME, what would your advice be? And then if you were to be a peer mentor to a business owner of a large organization, what would you say to that person? So let's just start off with the SMEs first.
I think if you're a small, medium enterprise, it's important right now to use this stay home lockdown to think out of the box. You have to start thinking differently because post-COVID, things are going to work differently. And it's important to think out of the box. What do you want to do in terms of people in your company, in terms of the product or service that you are doing? Where is it going to go? and take into consideration also what your market is. Okay, so thinking out of the box is so important. So what you've been doing may not work anymore post-COVID. For the big organizations, I would say complacency. Don't be complacent. Always think ahead. So currently you may be doing well, or you may be doing not so well. But in a big organization, if you're not doing so well, start to restructure, start to revamp. Remember, when the time comes, it's like a Titanic. You're not going to be able to maneuver it that easily. But you can start now when times are slower. If you're not doing that, if you're doing well, then it's still not a time to be complacent. How do you move ahead post-COVID? You know, taking into account the changes in the consumer behavior, changes in the market conditions, the so-called recession or the potential recession that's coming. How are you going to react? And as a big organization, I think you have to really, really think ahead.
What are your thoughts of this talk about how increasingly with post-COVID that there should be a lot more consolidation, people coming together?
I like consolidation is in the sense that I always feel, you know, the unity is important. United we stand, divided we fall. So if you're in the same industry, I think it's good to consolidate. However, that depends on the people. You should always look at the people first. Who are the people behind it? You know, if you're going to merge or consolidate or acquire, the people factor is always the most important, because that behind that people factor is the values that they will bring into when you merge with them, and you know, the values and the vision, the mission. And secondly, the product, of course. Okay, is the business going to be viable post-COVID? Okay, so I think even though you consolidate, is the consolidation going to make you stronger? And then after that, those two factors, valuation is just technical.
Indeed. So it really boils down, if I were to whittle it down to the very basic, it's people and products, really.
Yeah.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Wendy. I think you've given us so much food for thought, pun intended there. And really something for us to think about, and thank you for being so generous with your insights and your time. And, you know, when walking away from this discussion, I think the thing that I'm struck with is really your ability to see and be on your toes all the time. And you talked about not being complacent, and this is something that I see happening, because I've followed you since 5 years ago, and seeing you where you are today, and how you've, you know, sidestepped a lot of the sometimes, you know, controversies that come along the way, and along the way foresight. It's a gutsy move. You are a gutsy lady, and I have full admiration for you for that. So thank you so much, Wendy, for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, as for you, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to dig deeper into Wendy's story, you can. In this book that I have written, I wrote a chapter about Wendy because I was just struck by the story that she has to tell. It's called Power Talk: Insights from Asia's Leading Entrepreneurs. It features tycoons that I've met along the way when hosting my show, Powerless Asia, that was featured on Channel News Asia. And Wendy's stories in there. Get a hold of the book, find out a little bit more about her and the psychology behind how she grew her company, really. It's available on Amazon. Next week, I am going to bring you a much sought after VC, venture capitalist in the form of the founding partner of 500 Startups Vietnam. Yes, that is the 500 startups from the Silicon Valley, the people behind the unicorns like Grab, Canva, and Carousel. Ben Tran is his name. He's a successful techpreneur himself of a company that he started and sold, and it's called Clout. He sold Clout in 2014 for $200 million US. He'll be here to talk to us. Ben is a Vietnamese, grew up in the US, and he's one of the many of the diaspora that who are returning to Vietnam because of the opportunities there. And this time he returns as a VC with 60 companies under his care. Find out what are his highs, his lows in this unusual business environment and what he's looking for in the next company he invests in. And that's next Tuesday, 11 a.m. Register now. You know, I have only one objective in running this webinar, and that is for you to get ideas from the best, for you to be inspired by the people who have gone ahead, and ultimately to find hope in the midst of all this uncertainty. So from all of us here at Business Unusual, together with my technology partner, VLAN Asia, I'd like to wish you a hopeful day today. So remember, mask up and carry on. Thanks for joining us.